obligatory, I'm on mobile. So this is probably the scariest thing that's ever happened in my life. I'm a 23-year-old female. I was about 3 to 4 years old when this all started, and somehow has worked its way up until a few months ago. It's a long con, if you will. It's really not anything to laugh about. My single mom was a school counselor in our small town. The entire school, K-12, probably had 1,100 students. Everyone knows everyone kind of town. Although we did have a unique last name. My mom quit counseling when I started kindergarten, and up until high school, people would say, "Wasn't your mom the school counselor?" Before she quit, there was a high school student who also happened to be our neighbor. We did live in the country, so there were probably 2 to 3 acres away from them, with woods in between the properties. But in the winter, we could see each other's houses with the leaves gone. We weren't by any means close with our neighbors, and we lived far enough away it's not like we'd see each other in the morning and wave hello or something. Slowly, after fall started, my mom noticed things around the house moving, or pictures being turned down. She didn't really think anything of it, as she had me, a toddler, in the house. That was really the only thing at first, and I vividly remember her sitting me down to ask if I did these things, which I said I didn't, because I hadn't. I actually remember a lot of my life around this time for some reason. I know a lot of people don't remember early childhood. More things started happening, more things being moved around, but it was all deliberate now. Like a book in the fridge or a picture in the bathroom sink. We had a housekeeper at the time, but she didn't see any of these things and nothing was ever stolen. These things all happened during the day at some point, and even if they had happened at night, we were both extremely heavy sleepers, which is important. It was just after my birthday in February at this point. My mom knows that somehow someone has gotten a key to our house, so she changed the locks. She hadn't had time to get a new key to our housekeeper yet, so my mom told her to call when she was done cleaning, and my mom would go home from work and lock the door. The housekeeper did that, left, and my mom was there, 5 minutes later. She went inside to use the restroom, and there was snow and water all over the bathroom floor, which would be ridiculous as to why the housekeeper didn't clean that. My mom knew someone had to be in the house, and went upstairs and heard the front door slam. She went to see if she could see anything, and she couldn't, and that's when she suspected it could be our neighbor. A few days later, we woke up one morning. Also, I slept with my mom at this time because I was scared to sleep alone, and the house had been completely broken into during the night. Someone kicked in our porch door. Some of the snow had melted, and it was starting to get muddy. There were dirty shoe prints all over the carpet. My mom called the police and my grandma to come pick me up. The issues eventually stopped while I was staying at my grandma's. I didn't find this info out until I was about 12, but they ended up arresting our neighbor kid, who admitted to not only breaking into our house, but climbing in through a window for about 6 months to watch us sleep at night, copying a key and stealing both our underwear. He was expelled from school and sent to juvenile detention, and was in and out of the system for years after he was an adult. He had a wife and kids at this point and was living in a different town. I found this all out when I was 12 because he decided to move back into his parents' house again, and that's when stuff started to get weird again. One night, someone hit the sides of our house with a baseball bat, right under the second floor window where my mom and I were talking in her room with the light on, and immediately after, we heard someone get on a four-wheeler in our field and ride around. Some nights, we would hear a chainsaw running in the field. We set up trail cameras, and my uncle had a stake out to see if they could see anything. They heard some rustling in the woods one night, and shot a gun into the air. Not smart, I know, but harmless in this scenario, to scare off whoever. It all stopped after about 6 weeks, and we never got confirmation that it was the same guy, but we just knew deep down. We haven't had any issues since, other than the fact he added me on Snapchat a month ago or so. I felt my face drain immediately. So, stalker neighbor boy, let's not meet again. Or be Snapchat friends.
Believe it or not, but I always have been the type of person who attracts deranged people. I'm quite young, but I can't count anymore the number of times I had met creeps. This one, however, I will always remember it for several reasons. Firstly, because he was my neighbor, and secondly, because it could have ended up so badly. I first met him when I moved to my actual apartment. It's a nice house divided into 5 apartments. Mine was on the first floor, and his was on the ground, and I had to walk in front of his window to get to the front door. At first, I didn't mind him. He looked kind of creepy, but to me, everyone looks creepy. Well, he did get angry at my big brother for only walking in front of his window, but he never was aggressive to me. Plus, I spent most of the time studying and I was back at my place pretty late. Life was going peacefully. I finished my studies and got my diploma. I found myself a great partner, and I would have had everything to be happy if it wasn't for my health. It was declining, nothing life threatening, but I had to stay at my place instead of working. My life was pretty much boring and uneventful until one day, as I was tidying, my interphone ringed. Instead of answering it, I just looked through my opened window and saw the neighbor staring at me. He was standing there in front of the front door, still and kinda threatening. I asked him if he needed something, waited for him to answer, but after a really long silence, he just enters. I heard his door closing. It was weird, but I had better things to do, and I just went back to sweeping my floor. A week later, all of his shutters were closed. There was an inscription on all of them, sealed. It did not look official, more like crooked handwriting and messy black marker. Once again, I brushed it off as I was kinda glad the creepy neighbor was gone. I figured he got arrested or something. Once again, life was peaceful. And 2 months after his disappearance, a nice dude started living in his apartment. A great guy, always smiling and ready to help. He had his head shaved like the old neighbor, but was chubby and friendly. Everything was good for a year. But then, things went down. And oh boy, how ugly it got. I usually said hello to the nice neighbor, and he would politely ask me about my day, about my partner's day, and everything. That day, though, he did not say hello when I passed his window like he usually does. Instead, he was sitting in his chair, staring at me with dark eyes and following my every move. I still waved at him, smiling, and I figured he had a bad day. Since then, he would pass daytime sitting in the dark, looking through the window, and his nights blasting metal while he laughed and screamed like a maniac. At this point, neither me or any other neighbors could sleep. We kept calling the police, but they did not really care about some noise. I don't know when exactly I figured the nice neighbor was the creepy neighbor, but when I did, it left me with a sour taste in my mouth for some reason. Probably because I knew for sure he had a history of violence and fight gone bad. Then one day, I was at a friend for a week. Since my partner was working, he was keeping our apartment. I was shopping with my friend when I received a message that made me shiver. The neighbor let himself in our apartment, and my partner did not notice he left the door unlocked, and the neighbor just climbed the stairs, opened the door, and entered. I can't say exactly what happened since I wasn't there, but apparently he wanted to shave my partner's hair and eyebrow. He was delirious, having a hard time talking and just saying gibberish. My partner managed to get him out and close the door. He was merely amused by the whole thing. When I got back, things were getting worse. First, he would stop me and my partner in the street, completely gone, telling us how the only reliable source of information was our toaster. Then, he started to corner me. He would wait for me to almost reach the door and would violently open his door. Then he would tell me how I shouldn't go out, how I shouldn't trust anyone but him. It was clear as day how bad his mental health was, and his speech was more and more slurry, and he would take long pauses while staring to the side. During 2 weeks, he managed to corner me 4 times. Not much, huh? It was the only 4 times I was going out alone in those 2 damn weeks. This period was awful. I could not leave my apartment alone, and I could not live my life like I wanted. I just stayed locked in my place waiting for my partner. Even with precaution, I kept meeting him, and the more I saw him, the more uneasy I grew. For weeks it felt like a hostage at my own place. I should have called the police. As our encounter were more and more regular, he grew agitated. He would fidget. He would look all over and kept getting closer. There was a point I could feel his moist breath on my skin. I did not know what to do. I was terrified to call the cops. All of our other neighbors were on vacation. I was afraid he would try to hurt me if I called the cops. Until this day, I had to meet my boyfriend at a bar near our place. My first mistake was to leave long after my partner. I quietly climbed down the stairs, did not make any noise, when I opened the door and tried to sneak away from his window. He saw me. He opened the window, and for the first time since what seemed like forever, he told me in a clear speech, "Don't go outside. Stay at home. If you need anything, come to me or go out Monday at 7 a.m. I frightfully agreed and smiled at him, my hands gripping on my purse. I looked at him closing his window, and I waited for him to turn his back and started walking away. When he saw me, he screamed, "Don't fucking go!" I saw him reaching for his door, and I felt my blood running cold. I was nothing compared to him. I had no strength. I was just a still, quiet, sick person against a massive man. So I just ran. I ran for 2 minutes to the bar, passing bystanders who I'm sure stared at me, and I ran for my life. I kept running like this until I saw my partner and friends at a table. And then, just then, I cried. I collapsed on the chair and cried for 3 minutes straight. And later, we all went back home, our friends hiding me. My second mistake that day was to convince the others they could go to the theater just 3 houses away from the apartment, that I would be fine since I would not go out. They left, and it was hot, so I opened the windows before turning the fan on. I was quietly spending my evening, sipping on iced tea and watching stupid videos, when someone knocked. I knew who it was. There was only one person to pounce on my door like the maniac he was, and I did not answer. I just froze on my couch. The only thing I was able to think about was that this thin door was the only obstacle between him and me. Then he started screaming. I did not get everything he said. The fan was covering much of the screaming, but I still can remember some words. "Children of the devil, trust. Open the fucking door, and the worst one, you'll burn." Then there was laughing, just straight out of a horror movie. That's when I heard. That's when I heard him laughing, that it dawned on me how alone I was. How we were the only two people in this whole house, and how he could just snap the door open, and God knows what he could do. I found the force to get up. I went to the bathroom and sat behind the door. And then I cried again, trying to muffle the screaming and laughing, and I texted a friend who convinced me to call the cops. This time, they answered. I called too late. He was already back to his apartment when they came. 3 polite knocks. Then I let them in, trembling. They were 5, one of them on the step of another apartment. He found a glass filled with alcohol, partially drank, and I still can hear the poison in his voice when he bitterly said, "This asshole took liquid courage." They believed me. They reassured me, but at the end of the day, there was nothing they could do. I could just sit and wait terrified. After this, I went to the police station and filed a report. I quickly learned that 2 others did the same as me. A social worker went to the neighbor, talked to him, and apparently he swore not to bother me again. After that, it was just loud music in the middle of the night and nothing more. Still, I had this lingering feeling it was not over. For 2 months everything went fine, till one morning I opened my door and found a beer. I left it here and it was only gone late at night. The next day, same thing. He kept putting beers in front of my door for a week. It was 10 a.m. I was just out of the shower, dressed with a black t-shirt but still in underwear, when my inner phones ring. Like I always did, and because my window reaches my belly, I passed my head through the window. There, I saw a guy who worked in an office just in front of the house. He was screaming at me and doing wide gestures, obviously panicked, but right next to him was a neighbor grinning. It took me a couple of seconds to understand what was going on, way too much preoccupied by the sinister expression on my neighbor. But when I heard it, it was, "Come out! The house is burning!" And I looked in the direction of my neighbor's apartment. Sure enough, thick black smoke coming out of the open windows. I just put a jean and grabbed my key. No ID, no cell phone, nothing but my clothes and my key. In the corridor, I smelt the smoke. I coughed a couple of times before running out. I was frightened. I was confused. I was supposed to go to an appointment for a job only 30 minutes from this point, but instead, I was watching the house burning. I was fearing for my home being turned into nothing more but a pile of ashes. The neighbor was just standing there, a glass full of an amber looking like liquid, and his freaking grin. He was smoking, looking at the smoke while the working guy screamed at him. "You see? I told you there was someone inside. I told you!" I was still watching it all burn, asking myself how long it would take before the fire reached my apartment, when someone grabbed my arm. It was a woman, one of my neighbors who also worked next door. She grabbed me and forced me to sit on the bench with her. She took my hand and kept telling the neighbor not to approach me. She gave me water. She helped me in contacting the person I was supposed to see for the job. Most importantly, she did not let the neighbor get to me and stood in front of me the whole time, doing her best to shield me. The firefighters arrived quickly, along with the cops. They asked him basic questions like whether or not there was gas inside, but he mocked them, laughed at them. He tried to smash his glass on a cop's head. And that's when they arrested him. And that's when the woman let my hand go and told me this time we are free from him. The fire was put down quickly. Only his apartment was burnt thanks to a great isolation. However, the level of carbon monoxide was high enough to kill someone if anyone would have stayed. And all of his belongings were put in front of the house. Inside, the wall of the corridor, so white when I left, were gray, and every place a screw was left a black stain on the wall. It smelled like smoke, like burnt plastic and wet ashes. But we were fine. The neighbor was sent to a psychiatrist's hospital, and the landlord was finally able to break the contract. A neighbor told me that when he left that morning, there was a beer in front of my door. But when I exited in a hurry, there was nothing. The fire was ruled as accidental, and we haven't heard of him since then. Slowly, I was able to go outside without activating my phone camera and gripping my keys like knives. I was able to climb down the stairs freely after all this time. I was finally able to rest. But the belongings stayed for a long, long time, and each time I passed to get to the front door, I saw his notebooks laying around. I always told myself I wasn't the kind of person. I wouldn't snoop around. Still, curiosity got the best of me. And like I expected, a lot of gibberishes were written down, some racist stuff and a lot of Nazi symbols. Nothing that abnormal coming from this guy. Then I found something else, like a log, still hard to decipher until it all clicked. Under my eyes were the times when people entered or exited the house. He kept traces of everyone's moves. I found my pages quite easily, each days for at least 6 months. He knew when I was alone. He knew when I was going grocery shopping, how long I left, and how I looked when I was back. Each time I passed his window, he would write it down, and he would write comments which sometimes made sense, sometimes not. And most importantly, when the fire started, he knew I was still inside, and he knew I was the only one left. I closed the thing and just went to my apartment. I closed the door like you close a case, but still, I silently prayed to never meet this guy again. Because if we meet again, I don't know whether or not I will be able to tell the story.
I am omitting identifying details for privacy's sake. If your world absolutely cannot go on without them, feel free to DM me. You've got a 50-50 shot of me answering or telling you to F off. Take it back to 2007-2008. I was 16 when this began, 18 to 19 when it finally went to court. Picture a Norman Rockwell-esque suburban family. Parents, 3 kids, a yard, and a dog in Blink You'll Miss It, USA. One random day, a neighbor man has a mild dispute with his neighbor. As a totally warranted response, neighbor man, NM here on out, takes every hose he has and floods their yard. Solid decisions lead to solid consequences, so naturally he was fined for water waste. My parent runs the water in small town USA, and because NM lived a block from us, he decided to drive over to the water district, shouting that he is an acquaintance of my parent. Second solid decision of many to come from NM. Absolutely no one takes kindly to name droppers, folks, so tuck that gem away under life facts. My parent comes in and tells him even if his kids did this, they would have the same repercussions, gracefully glossing over the fact that, other than maybe driving by one another, none of us actually have interacted with NM. Gracefully glossing over the fact that, other than maybe driving by one or another, none of us have actually ever interacted with NM. NM repeats the name of the man working the front desk as well as my parents' name and claims, "It's now personal," and storms out. My family members and I began to see NM at random places, constantly. The DMV, the grocery store, our respective jobs. Apparently, when you are cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs and your parents pay for your house, you have all kinds of time to stalk. It went from random sightings while out and about to phone calls. The cliche 90s type of call, breathe, hang-ups, and I can see you variety. At this point, NM was more of an annoyance than scary, but as I have stated, when you underestimate crazy, you lose every time. NM began parking across from our house, staying from 6 p.m. to 4 a.m., literally just sitting in his car, blasting music, staring at the house. Fool must have had the determination and bladder of a racehorse, because who the fuck sits there for 10-ish hours? His music was trash too. Maybe he was a masochist and into self-harm, seeing how long he could suffer through shitty music and a full bladder. I doubt anyone with a semi-rational concept of social interaction could fathom why. This went on from 3 to 4 times a week to a nightly occurrence. Imagine being a 16-year-old female that doesn't even feel comfortable to change in her room because of the prospect he might see through the blinds somehow. Trying to sleep, knowing he's out there. We were prisoners in our own home. He began to get bolder. NM drove his car speeding and up onto the sidewalk at my sibling and her partner while they were on the sidewalk out front coming home from a date. They both had to physically jump out of the way to avoid being hit. He made lewd gestures at me when I brought my dog out for a walk, and I was waiting for my sibling to come out and join us on the walk. It was so bad I ended up crying and going inside. This had been going on for a year at this point. The cops always said the same thing. There's nothing we can do unless there's a threat made against you or someone's harmed. My parent confronted, meaning tired of his shit and asking him what he thinks he's doing, NM in the street after my incident, to which NM called the cops and they came asking us why we were harassing and threatening NM. I will never understand why the system waits until you are a victim rather than prevents someone from being victimized. Almost 2 years in, and it's Christmas time, my parent has a brain aneurysm. Fortunately, they made it through without any lingering effects, which is extremely rare. I convinced my other parent, who had been living at the hospital with their sick partner, to come home and shower and eat. About 9 p.m., we get a knock at the door. A random man in ratty clothes holding a Christmas present says he is there to deliver it to family name. We ask who sent him, and he says he can't say. We ask who he works for, and he shoves the gift at my parent and leaves. We are obviously uncomfortable to open it. Parent decides they need to know what it is and opens the present. Inside is a 17-page document of the grounds on why NM is suing my parent that was currently in the hospital. Even I could tell it was fake with the grammatical errors and typos. NM took the time to sit and type this up himself, thinking it would scare us. The document and fake details he put in did not. The fact that this 40-something-year-old man was so fixated on our family that he sat and typed a 17-page fake document did scare us. Things progressed, and NM began pacing in front of his car and pretending to have phone calls where he talked about pushing my parent down the stairs or knowing where we kids went to school and worked and how easy it would be to access us at any time. At the time, I worked a closing shift that led me off about 1 a.m. He would be parked next to my car and follow me home. One time, I even tried to take random roads, and he still stayed right behind me. Pulling up to the house with NM parked across the street, think neighborhood street with maybe 5 feet between a car parked on one side and one on the other, and having to get out and run to the door was a nightmare. We were all exhausted from not only the aneurysm scare, but also looking over our shoulders. My parents' friend told her, who is a DA, district attorney, about the situation. She called and came over and took our case pro bono. Testifying was a wild ride. We had to put in official statements prior to being called to the stand. We were not allowed to be in the room when a family member was testifying, nor were we allowed to talk in the halls as we waited for our turn. Imagine reliving 2+ years of traumatic experiences, being cross-examined where you are made out to be a liar, and then not able to have your family comfort or support you afterwards was not ideal. There is enough to put him away for a 1.5 years, as well as grant a felony restraining order. We moved while he was incarcerated. My sister passed away while he was in prison, and he immediately tried to sue her estate. She was 21 at her death when he was released. He claimed that her testimony from him running his car at her and her partner was false, the only reason he was locked up. Not the case, as there were harassment and stalking charges, and that the money people donated to a GoFundMe for her accident he was entitled to. There's so many more details, but this was already long enough. So, NM, let's never ever meet again. You made us prisoners in our own home for years. Clearly you're still the same and have not learned a thing from your time locked up. TLDR, Mom and Dad pay for their 40-year-old son's house, so he has plenty of time to harass and stalk. This Fruit Loop of a fool obsessed over our entire family even after doing time. Bruh, we're just not that into you. Find some actual friends with all your free time.
My friend Sally has had a bad run with neighbors, but this one was the worst. Sally lives very close to me, about a 10-minute walk, and we were both around 14 years old when this happened. We live rural, so we both have a lot of land. Me and Sally decided to go camping on her land. We bought cheap hammocks and went through the bushland. The days prior, we spent clearing some of the razor grass with a K-knife to make a path. We probably should have worn long pants because we ended up with little cuts all over our legs and some on our arms. We set up our hammocks and brought quite a few blankets because it does get pretty cold at night, even though you're sweating throughout the day. We were still on her property and hadn't gone to her neighbor's boundary. Her neighbor had just leased the land to new tenants. Me and Sally were sitting on our hammocks, talking and laughing, and this was around 9 p.m. when we heard something in the bush. We just thought it was a wallaby. There's plenty of wallabies around here. Then we could see the figure of a man. We were whispering to each other, trying to see who it was. At first, we thought it was her brother. His comment scared us when we were camping previously. Then, as the person got closer, we were thinking it could have been her dad. It was dark, and the bush looks the same from every angle. We realized the man was coming from the other direction than her house. We didn't dare move and covered our torches under our blankets. The man came up and said hi and introduced himself as Ben. Now, Ben was extremely drunk. He staggered around and reeked of alcohol. He started saying how we had a nice little camp here and said something pretty unsettling. He said, "I'll have to come out and sunbake naked here on one of these hammocks." Me and Sally gave each other worried looks, but didn't say anything. It only got worse from there. I can't remember everything he said because it was a while ago and he was mumbling on for what felt like forever. But some of the things that stuck out were, "I'll have to kill ya, Wolf Creek style," and said, "You're nearly legal then," when he asked us our age. Ben was probably in his 40s. Me and Sally were texting each other and coming up with an escape plan. He also offered us a puff on the magic dragon and pulled out a glass pipe. We declined. Sally said that we were leaving back to the house to make food. He told us to come back, and we left our blankets and most of the stuff there and legged it. We told her dad what had happened, and we slept inside. The next morning, we went back out to the campsite to find everything burnt. A circle with probably a 20-meter radius was all burnt. Coming from the circle was a line of burnt grass going towards the neighbor's house. I'm not a firefighter or do forensics, but it seemed obvious that some kind of fuel was used. Me and Sally were talking, and it dawned on us the possibility that Ben may have thought we were in the hammock due to the pile of blankets. Ben was definitely drunk enough not to be able to tell the difference. We went and told Sally's dad, who then checked it out and then went next door. Ben's roommate answered the door and said Ben wasn't home and apologized, and even gave Sally's dad $50 for the blankets and hammocks. Nothing more happened for a few months. Sally told me at school about how Ben had been caught on camera sneaking around her yard. I went to her house after school because she was going to be home alone until her dad finished work. I ended up sleeping over there that night. That's when he came over. Ben was drunk and came out front of Sally's house and started yelling he accused Sally of stealing his dog. Sally's dad called the police and they arrested him. The next day, we found a knife in the yard. It wasn't from Sally's house. The police came again and we told them about the knife, and they got the footage from the cameras as well. I don't know what happened to Ben, but he no longer lives next to Sally. So Ben, let's never meet again.
Hi everybody, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really do appreciate it. And if ever you want to send me a story to read, you can send it to my email, which is in the description of the video. If you want to follow me on my social media, links and information about my Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook pages are in the description too. Also, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already, and click on that notification bell. Again, thanks for watching.